This is Take Back Our Power with host Joy Binah. Information that supports community health. Information empowering you with personal health. Take back our power. And now, here's Joy.
Welcome. I'm Joy Binah, and this is Take Back Our Power. Today's guest is Rick Longinotti. Rick is a marriage and family therapist living in Santa Cruz. For 20 years, he worked as an electrical contractor. Motivated by his interest in reducing our dependency on fossil fuels, Rick became active in opposing a desalination plant to be built in Santa Cruz. Santa Cruz Desal Alternatives' effort to steer the city toward more sustainable water solutions was indeed successful. Today, he is here as a representative from the Campaign for Sensible Transportation in Santa Cruz. The campaign is currently advocating for alternatives to widening Highway 1 in Santa Cruz County. Rick's interest in sustainable transportation took a personal turn in 1995 when he parked his work vehicle in his driveway to see if he could conduct his electrician business by bicycle and trailer. Welcome, Rick.
Thank you.
Yeah, so tell us right away about that experiment of parking your bicycle in your driveway,
Right.
parking your vehicle in your driveway.
Right.
And
Yeah, so I was working as an electrician since about 1980, and I had my van. I would arrive at a job site during the Gulf War. Remember the Desert Storm when the troops were amassed in Saudi Arabia and then rolled back Saddam Hussein's army. And a lot of the folks that would show up on the job site were, they had American flags on their antennas at the time. It was this pro-America feeling, and I had a very mixed feeling because I knew that war was about oil. Everybody knew it was just about oil. So we were shedding blood so that we could have our oil supplies secure. And I thought, that's just another reason that this dependency on oil has us over barrel. It's, no pun intended, but it's the idea that we need to have wars in order to secure this thing bothered me. So I for a few years I kind of mulled that over, and I was inspired by a landscape contractor who was doing his work on bicycle. And so I figured, hey, can I do this?
Terranova, that was Ken Foster.
Right, Ken Foster. So could I do this? That was the question. So I tried for 3 months. That was my trial period, and it worked. And people would actually call me because they saw the sign on the back of my bike trailer. And so I got jobs within a smaller geographical area, and it was able to happen.
Yeah, that's so great.
Yeah.
It was such a great example for all of us.
So that was the kind of personal commitment that made me sensitive to when our city, for example, was about to embark on a very energy-intensive solution to our water supply, which is desalination. I thought, there's got to be a better way, and we found a better way ultimately.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So tell us what you're working on now. What's going on?
Yeah. So again, it's like I can't stop myself from being involved with this issue. For many years, in Santa Cruz County, there's a regional transportation commission. Every county has a transportation agency like that. And they've been, for many years, their priority has been to widen Highway 1. Highway 1, from Watsonville to Santa Cruz is often very backed up. There's traffic jams every day, commuters. So the idea was to widen it in order to, decongest the highway. And that has just been shown not to work in places where all over the country, including Southern California, where it's been studied. They have found that it actually the new capacity on highways fills back up with cars. And there are more cars on the highway going just as slow as they were before. So again, it's like there's got to be a better way, and in fact, there are some better ways.
So what are the alternatives to
Well,
widening Highway 1?
Well, similar to Monterey County, about 10 years ago purchased a rail corridor that runs along Highway 1. In Santa Cruz, there's a rail corridor that runs from Watsonville through Santa Cruz. And that offers a lot of possibility, because not only can there be a bike and pedestrian trail along that, but also there could be transit along the rail line, electric vehicles that run up and down along that. And our transportation agency has studied that and had found it to be feasible. It's cost a bundle of money to fix up the tracks and to make it possible, but that would offer an option to people who are now stuck in traffic. And for those who if they're going over to San Jose from Santa Cruz County, they still have to drive their cars, but there'll be fewer cars on the highway on account of the 6,000 or so people per day that could be taking that rail transit. So that's one of the options. But there's this old idea of widening the highway that gets in the way. So now there's a sales tax measure that's being discussed for Santa Cruz County that would put some money in the highway and some money towards the rail line. And we're avoiding that tough moment of having to actually make a decision. Well, where are our priorities going to be? But this is the year. It does. It's a 30-year tax measure, so we're not going to have this come around, but maybe once in a generation, where we get to vote on where our transportation dollars are going to go. So we need to get it right.
And what do people who are pro the widening of Highway 1 say about your critique of it?
Yeah, well, it seems obvious, if you're stuck in traffic and you think, well, if there's an extra lane here, that would be good. That seems like an obvious solution. And it's only by studying where freeways have actually been widened that we've learned that doesn't work. The reason it doesn't work so well is that there's this pent-up demand for transportation. There are this huge job generation in Silicon Valley, with people looking for housing, in Livermore and Salinas, places that are far away. And if you open up the highway to allow more commuters, it'll be okay. It'll be good for a little while, or you see an improvement for a little while, but then people make decisions about where they're going to live. So somebody who has a job in San Jose might think, oh, Watsonville's not so bad, so I'll locate there. And then that's why the highways fill up again with the traffic from people who are making those kinds of decisions. So really, we need another option besides just the automobile. That's our only option right now to get that north-south direction. With bus service that's minimal, and it's actually being cut back as we speak. The Santa Cruz Metro is being cut back on account of budget problems. So what we're talking about is expanding choices so that we're not a prisoner of our automobile, that we do have some other options. At least some of people have some other options.
And how is sustainable transportation a social justice issue? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, it's not often obvious, but if you think about places like San Francisco where housing prices are just out of sight, and we have a graph that we can look at there, which shows that San Francisco is actually, if you combine the costs of housing and transportation, San Francisco is a more affordable place to live than places like Riverside, California, which require such a long commute for people to get to their jobs. So what that long commute requires is that people have 2 automobiles per household or whatever. In San Francisco, you may get away with 1 less automobile per household, or maybe even no automobiles per household, because it's so easy to get around without an automobile. And that's where it becomes an issue of social justice, because if if people are able to save an expense of one automobile per household, that's enormous savings in their cost of living. So our choices about our transportation future actually have to do with what kinds of commitments we're going to have to make in our household expenditures for the next generation.
So Rick, besides the transit on the rail corridor, are there other alternatives that you can speak about?
Yeah. So when you think about big employers, the University of California, Santa Cruz, for example, has what they call transportation demand management. And so what that means is they're trying to reduce the number of automobiles that wind up traveling to campus. And they do that in a couple of ways. They offer bus passes for their employees at an enormous discount. For $10 a month, you can buy a bus pass versus a $60 bus pass. They offer van pools for members to combine together to get to campus. They've got showers for people who are riding bicycles on campus, and they've got, because the campus is up on a hill, they've got vans that pick people up and their bicycles get lined up on a trailer and they can cart them up to campus. So, and the students have free bus passes. The students have paid into, for the last 30 years, students have paid into a fund that goes towards free bus passes for all UCSC students. So these measures reduce the amount of commuting that has to happen by single occupant vehicle. Though the other thing is carpools. It costs a fair amount of money to park on campus to get a parking permit, but you get a discount if you're in a carpool. So there are a lot of other employers who could do that. In addition, employers who can make it more possible for their employees to do, what you call telecommuting, working at home. And if our transportation dollars, some of them would be spent just on helping that process out, helping employers figure out how they're going to get employees together to carpool and so on. That would reduce the number of cars on the highway. There's also just making bicycling safer. Our group, the Campaign for Sensible Transportation, did a poll. We did a survey of over 500 people who worked in downtown Santa Cruz, and we found out that over half of them live within 3 miles of downtown, and many of those people would be willing to bicycle if they felt safer. And so one of the beautiful new options for Santa Cruz County is a bike and pedestrian trail along the rail corridor. And so because that's not going to be interfered by riding along this, it's not like riding along the street with automobiles going fast. There'll be their own dedicated pathway. People are going to feel a lot safer riding on that, and that will make a huge difference for people commuting into town. What's interesting to note about this whole debate over whether to put dollars into the highway expansion is that Caltrans, the State Department of Transportation, has changed their priorities. Caltrans was the agency that built freeways. In the last few years, they've completely altered their mission statement, and now their goal is that by 2020, they want to triple bicycle trips, they want to double transit trips and double pedestrian trips. That's where they want to put their money. So that local counties that want to expand highways, they're on their own pretty much. You can't really depend on state dollars to do that. That's not the priority anymore. So if Santa Cruz wants to widen Highway 1, we need to raise the money ourselves. And that's what this sales tax is about, where a portion, about a fifth of the money, would go to widening the highway. What our group is advocating is that this transportation sales tax be altered so that the money that is meant to go for the highway goes for these other projects, the rail trail, the bus system, fixing local roads and streets, and eventually towards transit on the rail line. Those are all projects that we support, and in fact, we really need. So when you think about when you think about the impact of widening the highway, you need to look at, I mean, you asked the question like, well, what do people who want to widen the highway, what do they say? Well, what we ask is that people look at the environmental review of the highway project. So Caltrans conducted an environmental impact report in which they examined the expansion of Highway 1 and what the impacts on congestion would be. And they found out that there would be a very slight, these are their words, a very slight improvement in traffic congestion with this new project. That's after spending more than $100 million on, which is a lot for Santa Cruz County. And we believe that we can get at least that amount of congestion relief through these other measures, through the rail transit, through the transportation demand management, through improving bicycle and pedestrian paths. That environmental review also said that, okay, you're gonna get a marginal congestion relief, if any at all, but you're actually going to have more cars on the highway. You're going to have 25% increase in greenhouse gas emissions due to all these other cars that are going to be on the highway. Now those other cars, they're going to be on our city streets. They're going to be clogging up, neighborhoods and so on. We really need to decide if that's the future we want to go in, or if we want to make it easy and convenient and affordable to get around without using an automobile.
And city planners, city and county planners should take into consideration where new development is going to be happening.
Absolutely. You've really hit on the long run solution to our transportation issues, is because why are people commuting to begin with? It's because they're living far from where they work. We need to bring that together. The location where you live and work need to be closer. And it's not closer right now because of the land costs and housing affordability that is so out of sight. So it's a major policy initiative for local agencies to try to make housing that's affordable to the workforce be located near those jobs. And we haven't done that up to now. Our zoning policies have been actually in the opposite direction. We've made it impossible, for example, in Santa Cruz County to build apartments or condominiums in parts of the county where it would make sense, where it would be near the job centers. We let the private housing market basically build luxury housing or luxury condominiums when that'll be attractive to people who will commute over the hill, who can have those kinds of high incomes to be able to afford those, when the housing that we need is really for the workforce, which in Santa Cruz County is largely around its agriculture, tourism, and around the service industry, which is not that high paid. So we're forcing our workforce to commute from out of the county. So it's a social justice issue in many ways to be able to have housing that's affordable. And it needs to be done in combination with the transportation, because if you just build more housing and you don't provide the non-automobile transportation, then you're creating what everybody hates, which is the negative impacts of growth, which is more congestion on our streets.
So in essence, this challenge that we're facing is directly relating to the environmental issues of our time. How can we proceed with this issue, keeping that in mind, because it's so critical right now?
Yeah, it's at some future time, people will look back and will think, wow, how did society get so far off course on burning these fossil fuels and sending so much carbon into the air, changing the entire climate of the Earth.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we didn't consciously make a choice, you know, that we're going to alter the climate. It happens as a result of millions of decisions, small decisions, such as the one that voters are going to have to make now on a sales tax measure. But we see not just the carbon impact, the carbon burning that's impacting the climate, but we see the extraction impacts. There's a slide that I hope you can see about the tar sands in Alberta, Canada, that are being extracted. They're destroying, you know, entire mountain ranges to extract the earth, which has tar in it, and they can extract oil from that. That is incredibly destructive.
I know that the moose population in that area has been totally decimated.
Right. It's a tragedy of enormous proportions. What's happening there, and that's all just to go up in smoke, to go out at our exhaust pipes. You know, the human cost, as I mentioned, of wars for oil, the extraction impacts in our oceans. You know, the Deepwater Horizon, you know, in the Gulf of Mexico that blew up. I mean, those are just periodic things that every so often there's an oil drilling platform that goes awry. You know, so there are all these signs that we're getting, all this feedback that our addiction to fossil fuels is having these negative impacts, and yet we're hooked, you know.
Yet we're considering widening the highway to accommodate more vehicles.
Right.
I mean, how ridiculous is that?
Yeah. So it makes a lot. I don't think there's anybody sitting on that highway that really wants to, you know, have these negative impacts. But the question is, can people find an alternative? And that's where we can come together. Is like, yes, for some people at least, let's make sure that there are alternatives. The sales tax measure that we're talking about, we want to make sure it is the best that it can be and not have the highway funds in there. We have a website. It's called sensibletransportation.org. There's a petition on the website that people can sign online. We invite people to do that. We invite people to pay attention and get involved in letting our elected leaders know, you know, what our priorities are.
Yeah, I mean, the discomfort of being in traffic, the discomfort of having to wait, and, you know, that drudgery motivates people to look at other alternatives.
Yeah, it could, yeah. And, you know, when I'm out gathering signatures on the streets, you know, and somebody says, well, I think we need to widen the highway, and what I say is, well, I want to invite you to look at the evidence, you know, look at the studies, because, you know, let's examine this more carefully. We have this one opportunity. Let's get it right.
Yeah.
The irony of having a metro bus system that is eliminating its routes. It's got an express route on Highway 1 that's eliminating it. You know, because the funding is not there. It's just a statement of where our priorities lay.
Yeah. So tell me, are you familiar with what Monterey County is intending to do about this issue, and are, you know, Monterey and Santa Cruz working together to figure this dilemma out?
Right. Monterey County is actually, I would say, a little farther advanced than Santa Cruz County in terms of providing for non-automobile transit. Monterey County is extending the rail service to Salinas from Gilroy. The Caltrain right now goes as far as Gilroy, and they're going to extend train service down to Salinas, the Capital Corridor, which you could ride up to the east side of the San Francisco Bay and onto Sacramento, will run all the way to Salinas. In addition, there's the plan to run a light rail from Monterey to Castroville, and Castroville is on that other track that connects, San Jose and Salinas. So actually, the county will be well connected by rail. The opportunity for Santa Cruz is to run rail service down to the Pajaro station, which is just in the Monterey County side of the Pajaro River, and that was where Santa Cruz could be connected. So the counties people could really get around by rail. First Monterey County, which are farther ahead of us in their commitment, and then Santa Cruz if we decide to put our resources there. So I think that that's important from the point of view of commuters as well, because there are a lot of commuters that are commuting from Salinas up to San Jose. They'll be able to take the Capitol Corridor. There are commuters that are going from Salinas into Monterey that'll be able to take the light rail. So that's the future, and I think that communities that do that will be more resilient in an era of, these low gasoline prices are not going to last forever. Nobody expects them to. We know that countries, like the United States, reached their peak production of oil back in 1970, and ever since then, our oil production has declined. So we know that's eventually going to happen on a world basis, and that means higher oil prices. So communities that are ready for that will be the ones that will be most prosperous economically. And those that are still in a 20th century way of thinking are going to be left behind. And you saw that in the aftermath of 2008, when we had the Great Recession. The communities that had the worst kinds of mortgage foreclosures were communities like Riverside, California, where people had to commute for such long distances to get to their jobs. Those were the communities that were most economically hard hit. So this, it's a social justice issue, it's an environmental issue, it's an issue about our resilience in the face of future shocks in oil prices.
So Rick, tell us what we can do to support this more sustainable method of transportation that you've shared with us today.
Well, I think we can all be cheerleaders for those kinds of investments, in transportation that involve alternatives to single occupant vehicle. Even if we can't ourselves take advantage of that because of our predicament in terms of having to drive long distances, we can still cheer those people who can, and the community get behind the community measures that do that.
Okay, so tell us how people can get in touch with your organization and become more involved if they choose.
Okay, yeah, it's called the Campaign for Sensible Transportation, sensibletransportation.org. And we're all citizens, we're all volunteers, and we welcome people to get involved with us and support it.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for joining us today, Rick Longinotti, and for your continued ongoing service to our community.
Thank you, Joy.
Thank you.
Yeah.